It is Saturday, April 14th, 2018. I thought I'd make this for anyone who's interested in the vertical offset in general, Lone Star Grillz vertical offset specifically. This is a Lone Star Grillz 30-inch model. I've had it for a little less than a year now, been cooking on it quite a bit lately. We were traveling when the pit arrived, and so I didn't get to use it for a few months, but I've been using it extensively since then. So a little bit about the cooker itself. If you're not familiar with them, Lone Star Grillz has a reputation for very fine craftsmanship, and as you can see here, it's superb. The build quality is exemplary. This particular model I got with a few options. Some for the firebox. It comes with a cooking grate that goes underneath here. This is a griddle. Underneath that, I'll open up the firebox door here in a minute and show you, but there's a rack inside there, a cooking rack in there. You can also elevate the charcoal grate to get it closer to the cooking rack. I actually ordered a second charcoal grate with mine so that I could put a charcoal grate in without having to clean the coals off the lower one if I'm doing a reverse sear type thing, which I do frequently. So, in addition, I got it comes in 1/4-inch steel, the standard firebox. You can also get it with 1/2-inch steel or insulated. I kind of split the difference and went with a 1/2-inch steel. You get the griddle plate and everything else. We're in a cooler climate here, so I figured it'd be nicer to have some heavier steel for better heat retention. The way this cooker cooks, I'm not sure it's necessary, to be honest with you, and the insulated deal is probably overkill. Something else you lose with the insulated firebox is the ability to cook on the griddle on top. I have seasoned this. I did fry an egg on it one day. It did not stick. It worked nicely. So obviously the griddle plate is in there. You can remove that for cooking on the cooking grate or for other reasons. It's the firebox here. You can see in this particular slot, that's where your cooking grate would go. This is where your second charcoal grate goes, or this one. You can remove that one. As I say, since I do some reverse sear stuff, I didn't want to have to fool with removing the charcoal here to be able to move the charcoal grate up. So I've got a second one of those. Additionally, you can also get an ashtray that goes in here. I got one of those as well. It sounded like a great idea until the first time I used it, and realized I'm on a deck here. It's elevated. I'd have to carry it through the house. Or lower it down somehow, and it's just not practical to use. So bear that in mind if you're thinking about getting one of those. It sounds like a good idea, but not that great. It also sits up fairly high. It's fairly heavy metal, so it reduces the amount of ash that you can get in there. It would look like it would restrict the airflow a little bit, but it doesn't seem to. So. As a note, this cooker is probably one of the best. I have 4 smokers, wood burners, and this one draws better than any of the other cookers. And I'll get back to some thoughts on that here in a minute. Again, the quality is very high. You can't see any welds. They grind everything down smooth. It's just very, very nicely done. In addition to the options in the firebox, I also got the stainless shelf. The normal shelf, I believe, is 8 or 10 inches wide, and I got this. Looks like it's probably 10 inches. I had them add a couple of inches to it. It also folds, which is handy. The main reason I got this cooker was for the footprint and smaller smokes. I've got the Frontiersman, Yoder Frontiersman. It's 30 inches in diameter with about a 5-foot long cooking chamber. It weighs a ton. It's got an insulated firebox. It's a nice cooker, but for small cooks it's kind of a pain to drag out. I also have a Yoder Durango 24. It's at another location. And I have a Horizon Marshall 30 also at another location. I did a review on the Marshall 30. I'll probably do a more in-depth review on that one because it's my favorite cooker. There's no question of it. This one's okay, but it does have some foibles, and I'll get into that. I followed their break-in procedure to the letter, and still got some paint cracking and peeling and that sort of thing. There's some on the back side of the smoker too. I've got to get that touched up because it's starting to rust. So another option I got was the ball valve here. The smoker is designed so that you can fill the cook chamber or a portion of it with water to give yourself some steam. Usually use a water pan, similar to that one over there, underneath the lower cooking grate, but because of the footprint on this, the size of it, it's somewhat impractical to use. I have found, on the other hand, that the filling this with water is, I wouldn't say problematic, but if you're cooking a lot of food, all the grease and everything runs down, and of course it's lighter than water, so it covers the water, and after a while you're not cooking off a whole lot of the. I've done cooks where I've done a lot of like ribs and that sort of thing that are real greasy, and after the cook there's still water in there. Where if I'm doing a light cook with some chicken or something of that nature, it all cooks off. So I think the best way to do it if you're doing a long cook with some greasy stuff is probably to empty the whole thing halfway through the cook, add some more water so that the water continues to evaporate and you get your moisture in your chamber there, your cook chamber. So one thing about this cooker that is really kind of counterintuitive, it kind of defies logic. The firebox side is the cool side, and the opposite side is the side that's hot. It comes with 3 tuning plates. They tell you to start out with closing everything up on the right, the firebox side, and progressively get things opened up a little bit. It sounds good in theory, but I found that everything on the left side gets really hot, and the cool spot is over here. As far as cookers go, this is the fussiest that I have. So it's no matter what you do, you end up with hot spots. Something that's also rather unique about this cooker is it seems to cook hotter in the back than up at the front. So you get the side-to-side issue and the front-to-back issue. Tried different size fires and different locations in the firebox. Ironically, it seems like if you cook or build your fire furthest to the right or furthest back, that would be from this position over to this side of the firebox. It seems to keep the temperature a little more even front to back. But as you can see from the way it vents on the left-hand side, so when you're building your fire over here, it doesn't really draw all that well. So I've just gone back to building the fire in the middle. It makes very, very little difference, just a little bit. But if you're persnickety, then it might be worth building your fire on the right-hand side. But you want to mess around with it and figure out what works best for you anyway. So I've messed around with the tuning plates. In fact, yesterday, this is the first time I've cooked a brisket on this one. I'd been dying to cook a brisket on this for quite a while now, but because of the hotspot issues and everything, I hadn't done it. I finally decided, well, it's time to give it a try. I spent about 6 hours yesterday just running the pit with nothing on it, just some water in the bottom of it to help stabilize the temperature, and just kind of move the tuning plates around from time to time. I tried to keep, make small adjustments and change only one thing at a time, obviously. And I'd gotten to the point, because things were so cool on the right hand, the firebox side of the pit, on the right-hand side of the pit, I moved everything over to the left side, and big mistake, everything was hot on the right side and the left side, so I couldn't get anything to cool down. So anyway, I went back to the more traditional method. Things are still staggered across the pit. I do have a gap between the firebox side wall and the first tuning plate with largening gaps, and got it to where it was cooking fairly evenly yesterday across the pit. By the time I knocked off last evening, by the time I got it fired up this morning and got it loaded with a brisket, it was back to the same issues of cool on the right and hot on the left, to the tune of about 100 to 150 degree difference. So, and a lot of this also seems to depend on how you have your vents at the damper here and your vents up top. You can get it to cook fairly evenly, but you got to mess with it continuously. It's not a set it and forget it. Not that any stick burner is. They all require attention, of course. But if you want to keep this thing cooking fairly evenly across the whole pit, It's just a constant. Every time you feed the fire, every time anything changes in the fire, the coals, it's a matter of adjusting the inflow and the outflow up here. So I tried using exclusively the front vent, exclusively the rear vent, the two in unison at varying degrees, and it does help. But again, it's more fiddling than most people really want to do, and I certainly want to do. So I don't have any other kind of smokers. They're all stick burners, so so I'm used to fiddling with the fire and fire management and everything. But again, this one is the most fussy. Definitely would not recommend this one for a beginner. If you're a barbecue enthusiast and looking to get into your first wood burning cooker, I would recommend a pipe smoker, something that has a horizontal pit on it. It'll cause you a lot less frustration. If you're a cook that utilizes different zones, hot and cold, this would be fine for you. So but I generally try to cook everything at about 225 to 250. I cook as cool as I possibly can, particularly at the beginning of the smoke, so I get a nice smoke ring on the meats and that sort of thing, and then heat it up a little bit afterwards. But it's still generally 225 to 250. Unless I'm cooking poultry, and even then, if it's half chicken or parts of a chicken, I'll generally cook those around 250 to 275. Chicken wings, just so I get a crisp crust or crisp skin, bite through skin, I cook around 350. So that's about the only time I really cook anything very hot. Also worth noting on this pit, the first time I did cook chicken wings, it was the first hot cook I did, which was probably about 3 or 4 cooks in on this. All the doors really started to bind up. It got to the point where I practically had to jerk on them to get them to move. And I lubed everything up real good. It didn't seem to make any difference. It seems to have loosened up with time. It was the same way with the firebox door here and the lid. But as you can see, they now swing freely. Of course, I'm cooking at a lower temperature today. Nothing is binding, and after those first couple of hot cooks, they seem to break in and quit doing that. What's cooking today? Well, the brisket, of course. A little piece of brisket that's trimmed off. That's going to go in with some beans I'm making, as are all the trimmings off the pork spare ribs. Got a couple of racks of pork spares there, and a couple of racks of baby backs. So we've got some friends coming over later today, so I just threw a variety of ribs on. Just got back from Texas, ate no fewer than 3 barbecue joints in the week or so that we were down there, and obviously did not slake my appetite for barbecue. Seems to have whetted it, because I've been craving brisket and ribs all week. Ate at Cooper's in Junction. Personally, I would avoid that location. We've eaten at the Cooper's in, what is it, Llano, Texas. And that one was much better, I thought. And then Buzzy's Barbecue in Kerrville is really good, especially their all-you-can-eat Rib Wednesday. It's a losing proposition for Buzzy on that day, because I can eat a lot of ribs. Anyway, back to this. So that's basically it. The whole cooker. Again, beautiful build quality, but bear in mind that it does have some foibles. Those mainly being it's difficult to cook at a constant temperature across the pit. Again, not a big deal if you're doing different kind of products, or you like having hot spots and cool spots. But very frustrating if you're trying to do everything at a single temperature. The top portion of the pit also cooks a little warmer. Obviously, heat rises and builds up in there. I can't help but wonder if they had arranged the vents a little differently on this, if it wouldn't improve the evenness of the cooking temperatures across the pit. I think what happens, because this thing draws so well, it just brings everything in and just kind of shoots across the pit. Even when I had the plate set up over here, it would still get real hot over here. What happened when I moved everything over towards that side is it still got pretty warm over here, and then it got hot on this side too, even with a real small fire. So I think it just draws almost too efficiently. It pulls everything through, and along those same lines, this is probably the hungriest pit for wood that I have. Even the bigger pits with even a 30-inch Marshall without an insulated firebox, usually 2 splits is good enough, and that'll last me about 45 minutes or so. This generally takes 2 large or even 3 splits at a time, and it lasts for about a half an hour, and it's just enough to keep the temperature in the range I like to cook, 250 to 225 to 250. So yeah, it gobbles up the wood. In fact, it's time to add some more. So I hope this is helpful if anyone is looking at purchasing one of these pits. It's, again, beautiful build quality, everything's very nice about it, but it wouldn't be my go-to for a large cook, just because you have to have room to move meat around in there if you got a hot spot and you need to get it to a cooler spot, or vice versa. So the bigger pits are definitely better for that. Another bit of advice for anybody, if you're looking at getting your first wood burner, and that probably applies to any kind of cooker, get the largest cooker you can afford. The 30-inch pits I fill up all the time, so it's we have family and friends over. I like to gift food to people, and they fill up quickly, and it's nice to be able to have some room to work inside the pit. So. You don't have that when you get this small footprint. Again, not a big deal for this. I bought this specifically so I could do smaller cooks on it. When it's just my wife and I, we're not feeding a bunch of people. Today is atypical to have as much product in the smoker as I do brisket. And it's only 4 racks of ribs, still not that much, but you'll notice everything's for the most part over on the right side of the pit, where it's cooking a little bit cooler. Temps are down because I keep opening everything up. But, you get the idea. Man, brisket is ready to wrap. Got to do the Texas crutch here. We're at an elevation of, at this location, 6,300 feet. And as an aside, I've just found that you can't get a brisket done unless you do the Texas crutch. I wrap it in butcher paper and then to help preserve the bark, and then I wrap it in foil on top of that, and that gets it tender. If I try to do it in butcher paper alone or without any kind of a wrap whatsoever, the brisket will cook for 12, 16 hours, and it just never gets done. Obviously it gets hot, but it never gets tender. It dries out before it gets to that point. So, and it's time to wrap it now. So I think I've beat this. Oh, one other feature that I did get with this one is the larger hole. It's got some, you can see kind of a pattern in the concrete here, so I wanted to roll easily over that. It's still kind of tough to roll over those, so I would, if you have any kind of a rough surface, I'd definitely go for the larger wheels. All right, hope that helps.